Welcome back to another episode of Murder, Mysteries, and More. My name is Kaylee.
My name is Desi.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell next to the subscribe button to turn on post notifications.
Before we get into this case, we always encourage those who have useful information to any unsolved case, please report it to your local police and sheriff department.
Today we will be diving deep into the murder of Dorothy Jane Scott. Why did such a horrible thing have to happen to such an innocent person?
Sad face. A little background about Dorothy Jane Scott. She was born April 23rd, 1948. She was a single mother living in Stanton, California with her aunt and 4-year-old son at the time of her disappearance. She was a secretary for 2 jointly owned Anaheim stores that her father previously owned before he sold them. One store sold psychedelic items and the other one was a head shop. For those who don't know what a head shop is, a head shop back in those days was an outlet that specialized in paraphernalia such as cannabis and tobacco. Coworkers describe her as a devout Christian who did not drink or do drugs. They also say she preferred staying at home with her son. Her parents, who lived in Anaheim at the time, babysat their grandson while she worked, and Dorothy's father, Scott, said that his daughter may have dated on occasion, but she didn't have a steady boyfriend.
She was single.
Single lady. Oh, the single ladies! Oh, the single ladies!
Phone calls. Sometime in 1980, Dorothy began to receive phone calls from an unknown man. Dorothy claimed to recognize the voice, but she was unable to place who this person was. Sometimes the caller was friendly and complimentary. However, he was very strange and would comment on her comings and goings throughout the day. He also would comment what she was wearing, so clearly he was stalking her. Other times the caller was angry and menacing, threatening to physically harm or kill her. These calls obviously terrified Dorothy so much that she started taking self-defense classes. That was definitely a good thing for her to start doing. She even considering buying a gun at one point. However, Dorothy was a little bit afraid to buy a gun because she didn't want her little son to get a hold of the gun and accidentally hurt himself. That's why it's good to have like a safe for your guns. And in the 1980s, unlike today, stalking wasn't taken as serious by the law enforcement. People just, back then, it was a different time and they just did not believe shit like this could happen. And look where it cost many people their lives.
Yep, unfortunately. But on the night of her disappearance, it's a little weird. But May 28th, 1980, Dorothy dropped her son off at her parents' to attend a staff meeting at the head shop. During the meeting, Dorothy noticed Conrad Bostron, one of her coworkers, looking ill. Conrad had a large red streak on his arm that was becoming increasingly inflamed. So, Dorothy and another coworker, Pam, had offered to take him to UCI Medical Center. On her way to the hospital, Dorothy made a stop to inform her parents about the situation. Turns out, Conrad had unfortunately been bitten by a black widow spider, and that's of course why his arm was the way it was.
And you usually have to get a shot in your butt if you get bitten.
Yeah, true.
I know somebody who was bitten by a spider.
Yeah.
And they had to go through that.
Same. But after Conrad was released, Dorothy offered to get her car and drive around front while Pam accompanied him to the pharmacy. After Conrad got his prescription, him and Pam made their way outside. They expected to see Dorothy's 1973 white Toyota station wagon waiting, but it was nowhere in sight.
They were confused and concerned. They waited for her arrival, but suddenly her car was barreling towards them at a high speed, headlights blinding them. The driver drove right by them, made a right turn out into the parking lot, then turned off the headlights. Conrad and Pam were even more confused, wondering if there was an emergency involving Dorothy's son, and in a panic, she forgot about them. They decided to wait a couple hours at the hospital, but after waiting, they decided that it would be that Dorothy probably was not coming back for them. So Pam called Dorothy's parents and asked if they'd seen her. They said they did not. UCI police were notified immediately, but they found no reason for the alarm. Dorothy was an adult, and so she could come and go as she pleased. Several hours later, Dorothy's car was found abandoned and on fire in an alleyway 10 miles away in the city of Santa Ana. Dorothy was still nowhere to be found. Like, her remains were not in the car.
No, she was disappeared, gone. Sadness. But police began investigating and advised Dorothy's parents to refrain from speaking to any reporters. A week after Dorothy's disappearance, Dorothy's mom, Vera, received a frightening phone call. And the phone call kind of went like this. It was a man on the phone, and he asked, "Are you related to Dorothy Scott?" Vera, of course, responds yes, and the man says, "I have her," and then he hung up after that. Creepy-ish. Much.
Very creepy.
Yeah. Dorothy's father, Jacob, took action and contacted the Santa Ana Register, who ran a story about their daughter's disappearance. The same day this piece came out, the editor, Pat Riley, received a phone call as well from that same man. And the man on the phone said to them, "I killed her. I killed Dorothy Scott. She was my love. I caught her cheating with another man." Creepy. So creepy. Who? Bruh. But the caller provided details that only the responsible party, aka the kidnapper, would know, such as Dorothy wearing a red scarf and the reason for her visit to the hospital that night. According to those who knew her, Dorothy wasn't dating anyone at the time, so this was a little weird. And according to Pam, the only time Dorothy was out of her sight was when she used the restroom prior to her getting her car, and she never answered her phone or made a phone call or nothing like that. Dorothy's son's father, who lived in Missouri, was questioned at the time, but he had an airtight alibi and had been nowhere near California.
Yeah, he was 3,000 miles away or something like that.
Yeah, and who would want to take the time out of their day just to go do something like this all the way from Missouri?
Yeah, I definitely don't think he was guilty at all.
No, he wasn't.
The discovery of her body. 4 years after her disappearance, a construction worker came across something startling among Santa Ana Canyon Road in Anaheim. He discovered the remains of a dog, but underneath the dog was a human head, pelvis, 2 thighs, and an arm. The bones were partly charred, and authorities believed that the remains had been there for approximately 2 years. And the reason why her remains were charred is there was a brush fire in 1982 that swept across the site. A turquoise ring and a watch were also found. The watch had stopped at 12:30 a.m. on May 29th, which was an hour after Pam and Conrad last saw Dorothy's vehicle. Authorities confirmed a week later that those were the remains of Dorothy Jane Scott. These were the only skeletal remains that were left, and because of the brush fire that charred her remains, they could not determine a cause of her death.
Yeah, and they said it had only been there 2 years prior, so she was alive for 2 years, before that? Because she was missing for 4 years.
Yes, she was.
So, why did he all of a sudden kill her? Or he moved her body. Yeah. But shortly after this, Dorothy's parents began receiving anonymous phone calls again from the same man. He hadn't called them for a very long time after Dorothy went and disappeared. So, police installed a voice recorder in Dorothy's parents' house, but because the caller never stayed on the line for long enough, they were unable to trace the number. The family refused to change their number, hoping that the kidnapper would allow Dorothy to talk with them. And Dorothy's mom even said that he took a life that loved life. I feel in my heart that he deserves some sort of punishment.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's sad.
Into theories. Theory number 1, Mike Butler. Mike Butler was a deeply religious man and was well known throughout the community. Dorothy's son became aware of him through some friends of hers back in Missouri. He is said to have alternative religious beliefs. He could possibly have been involved in some cult-like activities. They think with the dog being buried with, like, on top of her remains, they think that there was potentially some type of cultist ritual. Mike's father was an army captain and his mom was a New Zealand war brat. He was in the army. He was a roadie specifically for his sister's band. Mike's sister at one point worked with Dorothy at the head shop in Anaheim. Mike at the time had settled in Orange County and worked in a machine shop across the road from where Dorothy worked, so he would have been able to stalk her easily. However, there is no concrete evidence and he was never investigated.
No, they didn't really investigate anyone in this because they didn't have any leads.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately not, because even though there are some potential red flags into like him as a person, they don't have anything that they can fully confirm. They couldn't fully confirm that he was actually doing cult stuff, They just kind of theorized it, so.
Yep. But theory number 2 is the Golden State Killer. And for those of you who don't know about the Golden State Killer, his name was Joseph James D'Angelo, and he committed 13 murders, 51 rapes, and 120 burglaries between 1974 and 1986. There are some similarities between Dorothy's murder and the Golden State Killer's MO, somewhat. He would always call his victims before he murdered them, and even on one weird occasion, he called a victim a decade later to let her know that he was still out there.
Which is so messed up.
Yeah, it really is. He would go after women who were home alone, single mothers or single women, mothers, women whose husbands had not been home at the time. He always stalked his victims before their deaths. Now, the Golden State Killer was also known as the East Area Rapist, and he was also thought to have been the Visalia ransacker. The Golden State Killer moved to Southern California in 1979, 1 year before Dorothy's murder. But there's some kind of holes in this, as far as Dorothy's murder seemed personal and targeted, especially because the killer proclaimed his love for her as well.
And he knew details, like she was wearing a red scarf.
Right. And the Golden State Killer also committed all his crimes at the victims' homes, and Dorothy was taken from the UCI Medical Center. So that kind of doesn't match up. But also, the Golden State Killer never claimed Dorothy as one of his victims, which I'm not saying that means anything, because we've had serial killers who have killed people and never claimed them, but still.
Yeah, I just don't think he did it, because this seems a lot more of an isolated incident.
Yeah, I think it's just a little kind of far-fetched out there.
Yeah, I
to be honest.
think she really knew the person that killed her.
Mm-hmm. I think so too, but she was the guy who was calling.
Theory number 3. Now, this theory is my favorite theory. It's secret lover / man on the phone. Some say that Dorothy could have had a secret admirer or a secret ex. She could have been upset about a breakup or had some sort of fight. In this, admirer could have feared that Dorothy was cheating on him because he had some trust issues. This would absolutely make sense due to the killer on the phone claiming that he loved her and that she called him the night at the hospital. The way he always knew where she lived, what she was doing, and how he got contact info on everyone in her life would explain this. Dorothy did work very long hours and always came home to her son. Someone would have known or suspected that she was dating someone. So those are just a couple holes in there. Is her family just says she didn't really have a steady boyfriend at the time. She didn't seem to have the time. But again, she's an adult, so you aren't gonna know like the full story.
Right, yeah. You know, a lot of people are private and they don't talk about a lot of things that go on in their lives, especially their love lives, so.
And she might have kind of kept that on the down low because she had a young son at the time.
Into Reddit comments, of course. And this is also one of these comments is another theory. It is by Do You Do? And this whole post is the theory about how it could have been one of her coworkers or somebody who was at that meeting. And Good Vibe and Sunshine says that I have wondered this too. It would explain so much. It would make it very easy to keep tabs on her if her stalker were a coworker, and also would explain why the voice was familiar, which makes sense. Yeah, and also Do You Do responded to that and said that a lot of people say if it were a coworker, she would have been filing paperwork with him daily or discussing the company's orders or inventory with him. Also, what if it was just an employee who was a cleaner, maintenance worker, or someone who worked for the company remotely that needed to be part of the meetings as company policy? That would make sense too.
Yep, that would. And then I like this name, Gingerbread Guy. They say, don't underestimate how obsessed the stalker was. I don't think he would have had to be at the meeting. He could have easily already been trailing her that day and just continued. In my own life, I was stalked and at one point was able to review my stalker's notebooks, filled with writing about me, where I was, who I lived with, license plates of coworkers, etc. They are thorough and tireless and painstaking. Nothing is too much trouble for them, not a normal mindset, obsessed. Yeah, definitely whoever murdered her, they were a psychopath.
True. They were crazy.
Batshit crazy.
Batshit crazy. Eddie Three Gates says that I have read that Dorothy's son thinks he knows who the killer is. He believes it was a coworker of Dorothy's brother. And says, I won't write this man's name, however, if you do a little digging, you can find it. This explains why she had recognized his voice.
Yeah, she did say it was familiar, but she could not place a finger on it.
Somebody said, I guess the killer could have been hiding in the car. Which would make sense. Actually. Oh, but then like hiding in the car the whole time. Like, even when they went to the hospital.
Ooh, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah. Well, and cars were massive back then, so like, they could have easily curled up in the trunk.
That's true. Alchemy 1914, they say, kind of odd that they took him to the hospital waiting to get treated. They're referring to the coworker she took to the hospital. Okay, don't he have a family of his own? How come they were there? Deleted says, I'd take a coworker to the hospital and stay there with him if it meant getting out of work for a few hours. And then Do You Do says, a poisonous spider bite is a medical emergency. LOL. Yes. Plus, Dorothy wasn't a doctor. Who knows what she was going through her mind when she saw a colleague about to pass out or whatever. Would you not do this for a coworker / friend? She might have been just like really close to him. We have, some people are good friends with their coworkers, so.
That's so true, though. I mean, yeah.
She was she sounded like a genuinely good person. So obviously, she wanted to make sure that this person is okay. So I don't see how it's weird that she took him to the hospital.
I don't either. Like, damn, do you want him to die? You're fucking rude. I need snacks. I like that. I need snacks says, to be honest, it is entirely possible this was someone they knew who was local. They put the high beams on and sped past and blew a stop sign. If you are committing a crime, you typically would want to draw as little attention to yourself as possible, but this person did the opposite. I always wonder if they checked the batch code for the gasoline can to see what stores it may have been shipped to, since they lit her car on fire.
On to the next Reddit post. It is by Deleted. Dorothy Jane Scott, single mother, 1 who was murdered and burnt. Who killed her? Oh my gosh, this is a long name. Puma Luma Asher to say. I think it was likely a neighbor who could watch her come and go. We haven't really gone over that theory, but I mean, they would know where she lived and everything.
So roasted oolong. Someone who is able to clandestinely plant a dead rose on her car, but still be able to call her shortly afterwards.
True.
Possible.
Yeah, that was kind of creepy. Plastic-cancel-4369. Does this one of the scariest stories I've ever heard? She was a good mom, a good person. She didn't put herself in harm's way either. I don't know that it will ever get solved. Yeah, sadly, with the way her remains were found, and it may never get solved, and it's honestly a really sad case because she was even taking self-defense classes when like stuff started to go wrong, when she was getting those creepy phone calls, and unfortunately she got murdered.
Svan Skyver says, I've always wondered why she risked going out alone to get her car. Why not take the other coworker with her? Or why not just send the coworker to do it? She knew she was being stalked. True. But
yeah, true, but at the same time, like, I hate when people, like, in stuff like that, they, like, kind of judge the victim because, like, you don't really know what was going through their mind, and also, like, she might have been so worried about her coworker that she, really forgot. You shouldn't have to, as a woman, have to have someone go with you to get your car from a parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't, but it's the world we live in.
Right. And times were a little bit different in the 80s as well.
True. Also, hospital parking lots were pretty active all the time back then, so you'd think somebody would have saw what happened if that was the case, but they didn't.
Yep,
so.
Unfortunately not.
Nope.
This one is also by Deleted. Dorothy Jane Scott, the creepiest case you have ever heard of. And then Zappa the Great. How horrifying. I feel so bad for her son growing up with that type of stalking and the loss of his mother. That is definitely horrible to grow up and have your mom have been murdered and not really gotten to know her.
Yeah.
Her son was really young when she was murdered.
I'd say he was only 4, so that's super sad. Like, dude. The Sergeant Matt Kind said that Stalker said he had her kid. She drives out. Stalker never had kid. Kills her. Shut up, Dana. Shut up, Dana. Says if this was more recent, I'd buy that theory. But for 1980, I think the Stalker must have approached her in person. I don't think he could have called her back then because she wouldn't have had a cell phone back then. He would have had to call the front desk in the hospital and speak to her there.
Ballswood says, a few things that struck me about this case. The detail about the watch is odd. I imagine it's meant to imply that that was her time of death, but the killer obviously invested a lot of time into stalking and terrorizing Dorothy and her family. Why kill her so shortly after kidnapping her? The dead dog on top of her grave. And
oh my god.
I'd like to know a bit more about the place she worked, Swingers Psych Lounge. The info in the link wasn't very clear about the place offered other than a room full of black light posters to go look at after buying a water pipe. at the head shop next door. Certainly the word swingers has its own implication.
Yeah. Deleted, to me, it seems personal. Maybe someone who knew her in high school. At the same time, with all the planning that seemed to go into the case, I don't think this was the first time Dorothy's killer did this. And then they say, I'd guess a family friend. And of course, they bring baby daddy up.
Sam_19982 says, I wonder if taking a male coworker set her stalker off. I imagine that the workers would have been all buzzed about the coworker needing to be taken to the hospital and probably talked about it in front of customers, hence how he knew she would be at the hospital. And then Maskin's Junk said, or he was a coworker, which he would have known that she was planning to take the male coworker and would have access to poison him.
Bruh. This person, Deleted, said, why do the police even bother with psychics? I can't think of a single case where a psychic has helped a damn thing. If I were a serial killer and I heard on the news that the police were involving a psychic, I'd breathe a sigh of relief. It always means they haven't a fucking clue.
What I heard too is like, the family was having a hard time with the police getting like any leads.
Yeah,
they were also useless as well.
They were very useless, bro. They had no leads. Oh, want to play ball. I think he used the dog to lure her. Perhaps he killed the dog, then put it in the parking lot near her car. Like most people, she would probably go to the animal to see what's wrong. After killing her, the man threw the dog's body on top of hers.
Oh my gosh.
That's messed up.
That's really messed up. But I can see like how that would definitely lure somebody in, but oh my gosh, jeez.
Yeah. Oh my god, this one. Sugarless 93. Wonder if Pam, her the coworker, had a boyfriend, husband, significant other whom she told everything. If so, it could fit. He would hear about Dorothy's day-to-day work activity from an unwitting Pam. Maybe he stops by to pick up Pam from work now and then, making his voice oddly familiar. Huh.
Very interesting.
I can see that.
I can see that as well.
Damn. Oh, that'd be really weird, but of course, many people don't look in the backseat of their car before they get in. I always be looking in the backseat. I'm like, who this?
Yeah, who does?
Somebody said, geez, what a dick. Oh, don't quote this comedy. Dorothy Arnold, Dorothy Forstein, Dorothy Scott. See a trend.
Oh my god.
I mean, not wrong.
And then we got Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz.
Oh my god.
Tornado took her.
Bruh.
And she had her little cute dog, Toto.
Toto. I haven't watched that in a long time.
40 years later, Dorothy's murder still remains unsolved. We can only hope that one day, with our advances in technology, that this case becomes solved and Dorothy's family gets the answers they so deserve.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. Remember to always keep your eyes open because you never know when you'll be the next one to go.